Welcome to the webinar related to how to repurpose content on social media, hosted in Social Talks, a conference by Social Insider. I am Elena, content creator at Social Insider, and today I have here with me Amy Woods, an expert in content repurposing that helps content creators grow their audience by maximizing their return on the content they create. So, Amy, thanks for joining us. We're very excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
And my very first question for you would be, what drove you in this direction professionally? Why repurposing?
Oh, that's a good question. So professionally, I guess I don't come from a creative agency background or marketing background, because actually the first decade of my career, I was a management consultant. So I was working for a big global consultancy and working with Fortune 500 companies on things like mergers and acquisitions and outsourcing and big change programs. And then, like, the long story short, but I always wanted to set up my own business, started doing something on a smaller scale, business consultancy kind of business online, realized the importance of content marketing, how important it is to create and share content, started to create and repurpose content myself, and then kind of just saw a massive opportunity to help people with their content by repurposing. And I guess my brain is wired in a very kind of process logical kind of way, like I love repurposing because I love you can bring structure and process, and I love the fact that you can get the most value, like squeeze the most value out of the time and effort that you put into something to create more from it. So I'm very much kind of wired that way, I guess. So yeah, it wasn't the most kind of linear path, I guess, but that's where I am now. So and I completely love what we do here at Content 10x.
Nice, that's very interesting. Can you tell us, what do you think would be the most important benefits and advantages of repurposing content?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's loads and loads of kind of benefits and advantages. I think that we put a lot of time into creating content, and it's really important to create quality content as well. So it's not so much a kind of volume play, but I think quality really makes a difference. And so I always say that I think you should really focus on creating quality content, really think about, who you are, what message you want to put out there, the reason and the purpose behind your content, and ultimately, what action you want people to take, or the way that you want to connect with people as a result of it. So when you've done all of that, it seems a shame and kind of a lost opportunity to then just go and create the next big piece of content, because there's so much value in that piece of content. So a video can become a blog post, a video can become a podcast episode if you have a podcast. When you're scratching your head wondering what to put on Twitter or on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, you can repurpose that great content that you've created into LinkedIn posts and tweets and things like that. So, a huge benefit is that it brings efficiency to your processes and your ways of creating content. It saves you time as a result, but yet you create more content as a result. You reach more people, because not everybody likes to watch video, not everybody listens to podcasts, a lot of people don't like to read content, not everyone's on Twitter, not everyone's on Facebook, etc. So it helps you to reach a much broader spectrum of people, and it helps you to connect with more people as well, because people connect with content in different formats and in different ways. So it kind of broadens your opportunity of connecting with people. And so, bringing that all together, kind of maximizing your time, bringing in efficiencies, creating more content, yet reaching more people with more connections with those people as well. It's a real mistake to put no time into repurposing content, because everybody should be embracing a repurposing mindset, in my opinion.
Nice. Yeah, these are a lot of helpful information for all of us marketers out there. Can you tell me what do you think are the steps of creating a repurposing content strategy?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's one of those things where, it really does depend, of course, in terms of what you're creating content for, and who your audience is, and all of, there's so many different factors. But I think there are still kind of some principles that follow, covering most different factors. So I think it all starts with finding the type of content that suits you best. So working out whether you're best creating video content, working out whether you're best creating written content, visual content, audio content. So firstly, I think it starts with making that decision on what is best. So what is best for you as a creator, what you feel confident, what type of content you feel confident creating, and then also that you can do your best at and bring the best side of you in terms of the messages you want to communicate, and also knowing your audience and knowing what they like to consume, and that you can get that sweet spot between what you're confident at and will be quality versus what your audience want. And when you've decided on that, really to focus on that. So I think the first part of the strategy is focus on that core content and decide what that is. I think the next part is consistency. So then being consistent. So committing to a regular schedule for that content. And I could say weekly, but really it's whatever is right for you and whatever you can be consistent with, whether that's weekly, every 2 weeks, even monthly, or twice a week, 3 times a week, whatever. But consistency is really important. And then it's about not trying to repurpose into everything. So then not having this massive repurposing strategy of turning that content into everything possible for every platform possible, but then truly working out where your audience are, and again what they like to consume, and then working out, okay, from this consistent regular content, what will we repurpose that into? Not trying to do everything, but focusing on the specific platforms, or maybe just starting off focusing on 1 or 2 additional platforms and 1 or 2 additional formats. And again, I think the word comes up again, but then be consistent with that repurposing, and really just try and follow then that process of a consistent core piece of content that you are confident at, that you can create quality content with, that you can go all in on, and then have that system in place to then do the repurposing of that core content. So don't try and do everything, focus on the core, and then have the process for how you're going to repurpose it. There's loads of nuances in terms of different types of content, different types of businesses, different types of audiences, but I think that's a really kind of key kind of top level strategy that you need to stick to with repurposing content.
I'm very glad you brought the subject, the platforms and the formats, because that was actually my next question. And I was just gonna ask you, how do you choose the platforms and formats when it comes to repurposing on social media?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think how you choose just absolutely comes down to your own audience. So, everybody's audiences are just going to be so different. So you have to make sure that you're choosing the places where you see that your audience are, the places where you see that your audience is engaging. So, for example, one of our clients is a recruitment company in the treasury industry. So their audience, their platform is not going to be TikTok. It's not really Instagram either. It's very much LinkedIn, because it's recruitment and it's, a professional company talking about recruitment of people into the treasury industry. So it's LinkedIn and also Twitter. But then, in complete contrast, another client of ours is it runs a cognitive dog training company. So her audience, her platform is Facebook, because she has a Facebook group. Her audience are on Facebook and also on Instagram, because it's also visual and it's dogs, and it's completely different. So I don't think anybody can really tell somebody, straight off what platforms they should focus on. Because unless you deeply understand their audience, you may not get that right. You can make obvious assumptions based on the type of business and the industry and that kind of thing, but you've just got to look at where your audience are. And if you're brand new and you're kind of trying to figure out where your audience are and you don't have an audience yet, then you have to look at similar businesses, similar people who are in your industry, see what's happening in your industry on the different platforms, and then make that decision based on where you see people hanging out and where you see them engaging as well. So I think that's most important, to just really try and truly understand who you're trying to talk to.
Yeah. And while you mention engagement now, I have to ask, since you're the expert in repurposing, what do you think it's the content that it's best to use on every channel when repurposing?
So what's the is the question like, what's the most kind of versatile content across platform? Yeah. Well, I would say video, really. I think video content is the most versatile across all the platforms, and the most engaging as well. And also from a repurposing perspective, the most repurposable type of content as well. But I think video, when you look at different social media platforms, even Instagram, that was, is purely visual and used to be all about the images, is, very video focused now, what with, video posts, with reels, with Insta stories, with IGTV Live, LinkedIn has embraced video, even LinkedIn stories, Twitter video, Facebook's always had all different aspects of video as well. So, and of course, TikTok. So yeah, I think video, that is without a doubt the most versatile cross-platform format if you want to focus on like a full cross-platform format.
Yeah, we saw ourselves too that video was like nowadays raised so much compared to the previous years, and it's still growing. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone's got so used to video content as well, haven't they? So, the year that we've had, or the year and a half that we've had as well, not only have people got used to potentially consuming more video content, but from a creator's perspective as well, I think people have got more used to creating video content as well, which is a great thing. So, where we've even down to small things like people becoming more used to seeing themselves on video, doing things like Zoom calls, right the way through to perhaps turning an in-person training that you might have done into recording yourself on camera, delivering the training, and all those kind of things. The way that we've all been so separated from each other for the past year and a half or so has resulted in just more video content in lots of different formats. But I think it's pushed people to maybe realize that they're a little bit more confident in holding up that camera and saying something on a social media platform, and a bit more confident being able to see themselves on camera. So, I think there's like a perfect timing of it all, really, with everything that has gone on in recent years.
Can you tell us what limits or risk do you think repurposing has?
Yeah, I think a risk. There's a few things to watch out for. I think, firstly, to be very respectful of the different platforms that you're posting content to. So, not necessarily just having a cookie cutter approach where you are copying and pasting the same thing into lots of different places, because you always need to stop and think about why people are on the different platforms, what they expect to see, and it's not to prevent you from repurposing to different platforms. It's more to say that you should really make platform specific tweaks and changes to the messaging and to the content to make sure that it is fit for each platform. And it goes, from kind of some of the bigger picture in terms of, because you communicated that as a video on LinkedIn, is video right for let's say Facebook, or on Facebook, do people prefer more to see your text posts or whatever it may be? So one thing is kind of just making sure that you mix up the way that you communicate the message based on the platform, and not copy paste across platform. Other kind of things like just maybe there are tools out there that automate the process of repurposing, and some of them are really good. But I think, again, I guess it comes back to just what I said, but not overdoing automating if it doesn't seem appropriate and it doesn't seem right. So for example, even just the smallest things, like you use a lot of hashtags on Instagram, and you say things like link in bio, and there's certain terminology and things like that. But if you just completely automate posting something from Instagram onto, say, Facebook, where you're putting all these hashtags in and you're saying link in bio and things like that, it doesn't make any sense to the Facebook audience. So just kind of like embracing automation if it's right for you. If it's maybe you have a small budget, don't have enough of a budget for like necessarily a team to be supporting you, but you want to just invest a little bit to help speed up the process. But just be really careful of kind of what you put out there, and your reputation and things like that, if you were going to kind of do cookie cutter automated approaches. But other than that, I think it's just, people also do worry sometimes about sounding a little bit repetitive, because I'll teach that you could create at least 10 different types of content from one main piece of content at least. I think people sometimes worry, well, you know, my audience like new content and fresh content, and if I've already shared that, you know, 15-minute video, I don't know if my audience are going to like, you know, me just talking about it in different forms of repurposed content. They just want me to move on to something new. And so they worry about that as a risk, sounding repetitive. But then my advice there is that you have to look at the different angles that can come out of your core piece of content, look at the different stories, look at the different ways that you can communicate, and just make sure that, you know, that you don't sound repetitive, and that you have a journalistic view of your content, that you can go off in different tangents and different angles to be communicating aspects of that message in the different platforms, in the ways that people want to be communicated with. And also, you don't have to publish all your repurposed content at once. Like if you repurpose a video that goes onto Facebook into 10 different pieces of content, those 10 pieces don't have to go out within the next week. You know, they could be evergreen, and the 10 pieces could be scheduled to go out over the next month, 6 months, even over the next year. So, you know, that's the beauty of third-party scheduling tools, to be able to schedule content out over long periods of time. So just embracing like an evergreen approach to the repurposed content can really help you overcome the risk of sounding repetitive, I think.
Very insightful. Also, can you give me some examples of brands that you consider that have a great repurposing strategy, and maybe some insights about why do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many brands. I was kind of just thinking about various examples out there, and kind of a little bit off tangent really, in terms of it's not necessarily business content marketing, but I always like to just share the examples of how top TV talk shows actually repurpose content. So if you look at some of the big talk shows, like in America, I often mention this when I have interviews, but look at something like the Late Late Show with James Corden, and how he has carpool karaoke as a segment within his show, and he also has all these other segments, like wind ups and things like that. And so some of those big talk shows and big TV shows, what they do is they'll repurpose all these short segments in their longer show, and they'll repurpose them onto the social media platforms. These segments will have their own playlists on YouTube, so people will become fans of repurposed aspects of people's main shows, as well as being fans of the main shows, or even instead of being fans of the main shows. So it's interesting. I would encourage anyone to kind of just look at some of these talk shows and then look at their YouTube channels and their Instagram accounts and things like that. And you'll really see how they just constantly repurpose segments of their shows for social media. So that's another good one. I would say, like, in terms of like business and content marketing, an example. So a client of ours, Jay Bear, who's really well known, in the content marketing world, one of the, original content marketers. So with his business, Convince and Convert, they have a podcast that's been going for ages called Social Pros, which we work on with them. And that's a really good example. So a good brand and a good podcast of repurposing, because they take a weekly like video interview that they do, they repurpose that into a blog post, like a well-written blog post. They repurpose it into the podcast episode that runs as part of the podcast that's been going for many, many years. It gets repurposed into lots and lots of social media segments, and different, from visuals to short audiograms to short video teasers, spread across the platforms as well. And anything else sometimes that can come out of these episodes as well, like infographics and things like that, and lead magnets too, to help get email signups. So yeah, like Convince and Convert, and just Jay Bear as a personal brand as well. If you see anything that he puts out, so his other shows like Standing Ovation, the Talk Trigger Show, there's one called On the Fly as well. If you look at anything that he does, you'll see that he is a real master of being able to see content and being able to repurpose it. And in actual fact, his Talk Triggers show was repurposed from his book. So his book got turned into a video show, which got turned into a podcast, which got turned into social media content. So it kind of never stops, really. So I'd really recommend, looking at those kind of two different examples to just see great repurposing in play.
Actually, the latest one you told us about also caught my attention. Then now that you mentioned it, I'm gonna focus more on it and study a bit the strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, do you think you can give us some tips or tactics, or maybe best practices for repurposing content?
I guess like my best tips would be, as I mentioned before, I think focus on a core piece of content and focus on becoming consistent with that. Don't get too bogged down in, I need to live stream, I need to podcast, I need to do videos, I need to do Instagram reels, I need to be putting out loads of like tweets, like LinkedIn posts. Just focus on one core piece of content, and then it's about the repurposing. So a tip I would have is to bring a structure, bring a process that you are going to follow for the repurposing of that core content that you're going to be consistent with. So the main thing to focus on is just that core piece of content and the consistency that you've committed to. And then a tip would be to use a tool like Trello, so like a project management tool, a checklist type tool like Trello, or there's Asana, there's Basecamp, there's ClickUp. All these different kinds of tools are very similar. They help you to manage like process and workflow. And even if you don't use anything like that, I really recommend, Trello for getting started. Then set up a Google Sheet or something like that, and just list out what your repurposing steps are going to be, and then make sure that you follow them every single time you create that core content. So pretty much don't allow yourself to create the next core content until you have finished your repurposing steps, and make it that process that you follow, and take it one step at a time. So my other bit of advice would be that I think a lot of people get really quite overwhelmed with the possibilities of repurposing. Sometimes it's probably my fault because I talk so much about all the possibilities that it can come a bit overwhelming, like, wow, I should be doing all those things with my videos or my podcast or my blog posts or whatever. It's easy to become overwhelmed, but it's very important to just take it one step at a time, because it's much better to have a process in place where you focus on a core piece of content and then maybe follow 2 repurposing steps every single week, where you'll take, let's say, a video, and every week you will turn that video into a well-written blog post and a LinkedIn post and 5 tweets or something like that. And that's what you'll commit to on that consistent basis, versus just trying to do everything. Turn that video into a blog post, into a podcast, into short videos, into, go on and on and on and on, because most people will maybe manage to do quite a lot for a very short amount of time, and then it'll become really challenging. The consistency will drop off, and it'll all kind of fall apart. It's much more of a solid foundation to just take one step at a time. And when the new step that you add becomes easy to do, second nature, becomes a bit more of a habit as part of your process, then add the next step on and just start to build up the repurposing steps over time. And finally, I mentioned it before, but it's not about being everywhere, and it's not about creating content in every format. It's about knowing where your audience are and making sure that you are repurposing content for the places that your audience are and the places that you see them engaging with your content, and not worrying too much about the other places. That doesn't matter if you've got an engaged audience in the places that they are.
Thank you very much for your answers, Emmy. Those were great insights. Well, now I'd like to do a little sum up. Basically, your advices were that marketers should create quality content, try repurposing, because through that you can reach more people, know your audience and be consistent, rely more on videos because they are the future, and to focus more on a core piece of content. That's great. Well, that would be all for today. Don't forget to follow Emmy on social media and for some other great tips. And stay tuned to the other webinars included in the Social Talks conference by Social Insider. And have a great day, everyone.